Ukraine still has the ability to inflict real damage on the Russian military, even as it does lose ground in Ukraine.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle, and I'm joined today by defense reporter Mike Brest. Mike, the big drone attack of Ukraine on Russia has everybody talking. What exactly happened?
So the attack we saw this week was, according to the Ukrainians, 18 months in the making. And so what happened was, and this was an ingenious irregular warfare attack on Russia, because as everyone knows, Russia is a much larger military. They have much more personnel as well as a bigger arsenal. So what Ukraine has tried to do is do these covert, smaller attacks to really hit Russia where it hurts. And so over the last several months, the Ukrainians were able to sneak drones across the border into Russia. And then they had these drones loaded onto cargo trucks and driven near 4 different Russian military bases, again, inside Russian territory. From there, they launched the drones, which were carrying bombs, and they bombed the airfields at these 4 different Russian bases, and they took out, according to the Ukrainians, up to 40 Russian fighter jets. And so this was a very monumental attack. That's about 1/3 of Russia's fleet. Now, there are conflicting reports about the level of damage, and if it was as high as 40, we've seen some indications that it could be a little bit lower than that.
Right.
But this was still a dramatic and daring attack, in part because no one was expecting it. We've seen nothing of the kind, and it really was the ingenuity of the Ukrainians behind this attack. And so we've heard from Russian President Vladimir Putin that he will respond to this, and they will respond hard. And a big part of this is some of the planes that were hit were part of Russia's nuclear triad. And so this was a big deal. And that being said, what we saw was a very dramatic moment, because it gave Ukraine a very significant morale boost from what we've seen. And it also, to some extent, leveled the playing field a little bit, because as we've seen, Russia continues to make small gains, is pressing forward, and is holding off on a ceasefire deal that President Trump is pushing for.
So you mentioned a possible Russian response and also this ceasefire deal. What impact does this have on the ongoing talks? Does this strengthen the Ukrainians' hand at the bargaining table, or does it really set negotiations back?
So from what a lot is yet to be seen as this unfolds, in part because we don't know exactly what Russia's response will look like, but I think it's safe to say this wasn't good for negotiations. Russia has continued to demand everything it wants. They're not willing to make any concessions to end the war. They're talking, according to their memorandum that they've released, they want to see all of the territory they're occupying in Ukraine be internationally recognized as Russian territory. They want the Ukrainian military to withdraw. They want the Ukrainians to hold new elections to force Zelensky out of power. They want Ukraine to officially end their efforts to seek NATO membership and to effectively demilitarize themselves.
Right.
And so all of those conditions, what they actually do is make Ukraine weak and available for another Russian attack when they are better suited to continue the fight. So what this did was this proved that Ukraine still has the ability to inflict real damage on the Russian military, even as it does lose ground in Ukraine.
So what are the risks for the United States? So obviously we're not concerned about the Ukrainian drones, but the United States is the last remaining superpower. Most of the wars the U.S. is going to get involved in will be against smaller enemies, smaller militaries, maybe even non-state actors. Is this drone strategy or tactic something that could be used against us?
This is a big concern that isn't new, but reached a new level, or came to the forefront of the public's eye this week as Ukraine carried out this attack. And it's not something that military leaders say they're surprised about. However, it really demonstrated what they've been talking about for a long time now, which is that these drones that cost tens of thousands of dollars to build inflicted billions of dollars worth of damage on the Russian fleet. And so just when thinking about the cost perspective of this, there's a possibility, not one that we want to see, but where the U.S. could have a similar consequence like that. And so while the president has promoted his Golden Dome as a way to prevent attacks on the homeland, the Golden Dome, as we know it, would not have stopped an attack like the one that just happened, because Ukraine snuck the drones into Russian soil. And so we've seen these concerns over the last year about these unidentified drones flying high in the sky in New Jersey and elsewhere. And so that also raised the concern about drones, especially as they fly over sensitive military sites. And so while this was not necessarily a situation that surprised U.S. military leaders, they feel like it only strengthened their argument as to why they need to rapidly improve the defenses of U.S. military bases here and abroad.
Thank you, Mike. You can read Mike and the rest of our national security team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.